Mindset, the podcast for candid conversations, staying curious, and being better. If you guys ever feel like doing us a favor, feel free to leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you especially liked a certain episode or topic, let us know on Instagram or share it with your friends who you think might also enjoy the topic. I know Jason and I would really appreciate that. Now, for today's episode, we had the pleasure of chatting with our dear friend, Rick Poirier, a plumber and entrepreneur. Ricky is owner of YMI Plumbing, located in the Moncton, New Brunswick area. During this episode, we discuss Ricky's path and reasoning behind choosing trade school and the challenges of owning your own business. We also go through the big 5 personality traits in order to determine what it takes to be an entrepreneur. Hope you guys enjoy.
All right. Well, Rick, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure's all mine.
And I gotta say, Rick's probably one of our most avid listeners, one of our diehard fans, good friend of mine. And
you're the one.
Rick, I've given him a hard time because Rick and me go way back, and whatever he does, I'll get behind him 100%, and vice versa. And we've been meaning to have him on for a good long while now. And Rick is one of those guys that if you pay attention, you'll certainly learn something. And I think he's going to bring a ton of value to today's show. Where one thing that we try to speak on is entrepreneurship and obviously becoming independent. And now we have the pleasure of talking to someone who's living that. And I think we're all going to learn something today.
I also think it might tie very well with that episode we had, that open discussion about, is university worth it? What are the other options? Things like that. So Ricky's a good example of that as well. So before we kind of get going with our questions, Ricky, do you just want to kind of tell the audience who you are, what you do?
Yeah, so basically I started plumbing back in 2011. My background is after graduating in 2008, I attended community college. I actually took 3 different courses. So I started in industrial mechanics, which is basically millwright. In a region that mills are all shutting down, so it definitely wasn't necessarily the best choice. It was a great course. I'd only finished the first year out of the 2, but I managed to go for my first block of apprenticeship and passed. So technically, I could be an apprentice in that trade still. After that, I did my carpentry course because carpentry was always something I had a keen interest in. But I didn't get the feeling at the time that carpentry was going to be the trade I really wanted to work in. So at the time I was working at a hardware store. And for me, I always enjoyed, I was a big Lego kid. And as a Lego kid, like putting stuff together and when it comes to plumbing, like you're putting fittings together, trying to MacGyver something. For me, that was a lot of fun. So when I started my carpentry course, I was already registered for my plumbing course the year after, because at the time, courses were full classes. Like if you didn't apply first, in August of the year before, you basically didn't get a seat. And then I did my plumbing course and I loved it. I was good at it, which, there's merit to say, like, when you're good at something, when it's going to be your 40-hour week job plus, there's certainly merit to being good at it where it's easy. It's more enjoyable. There's less pressure. So I started my plumbing career in new construction, mostly plumbing new construction. After I got my license fairly quickly after just under 3 years. And I went out west. I did some pipe fitting out west for a little bit, came back a few times, went back out a few times. And then I finally settled down and I picked up a job and I thought I was going to stick around there for a while. And then things kind of started brewing in my head, and I started thinking about things. And that's when in 2019, that's when I decided to make the jump to commit to being an entrepreneur full time. So that's kind of my cheminement, if you will, to this point, basically.
Right on. And when you mentioned the leap to entrepreneurship, is that you going on your own as a plumber? Is that What kind of or what exactly is that business?
So when I started on my own, the situation was the outfit I was working for. I think we were four plumbers at the time, and none of us were putting more than 20 hours a week. And I'd always been, even though plumbing is my trade, where I'm a journeyman plumber, I always dabbled in renovations, carpentry, and all that. And I knew if I worked on my own without the commitment of having to commit so many hours at random times of the week to somebody else, I was like, I can probably keep myself busy for 40 hours a week. Like it might be a push for the first little bit, but I can make it happen. So that's when I decided, because I just found myself at that point in time, um, especially with the hours, like with 20 hours, it was almost casual where you get just called in when there's calls. And I found myself getting lazy, like, because you can't really commit to anything during the day. It's like, okay, well, maybe I'll go to the gym, but it's like, okay, well, now you got a call to go in half an hour. So
Right.
it's like you never want to really commit to any one thing at any time. So I was like, like I don't like myself this way. It says this is not really me. Um, and I wanted something where I could kind of more take charge. At the time, I already had most of the tools I needed. I had the truck, I had the trailer. So it wasn't that far of a leap for me at that point, to say, my life can probably get better fairly quickly by doing this. I'm taking a risk, but I've never really been all that risk averse. So for me, it wasn't, I'd say, that much of a leap to commit to the business. But again, at the point, I wasn't necessarily fully aware of what I was getting into in terms of like future expectations of the business. Let's say, um, we're now 2 years down the road, and like if I would have had a business plan from day one, it would be wildly different from what I would have now, because circumstances have changed. Things. I've been extremely lucky. I would say so far, anyway, in business, where like work has been abundant. So usually you would think, when you start a business, that work would be, or if I guess if you're no, like I'm in the service industry, really, um, or if you're selling a product, you're worried about getting customers in and this and that.
Right.
But
Establishing a brand. Yeah.
exactly. But for let's say, like I say, for me, I got lucky. I got hooked up with a big contract from the get go. Established some really good relationships. I've been able to maintain, I would say, like the vast majority. Like if there's anyone that's wildly unhappy with me, I don't know of that person really, or my services anyway. Um, but yeah, like I say, it's been quite the journey for 2 years. Like I'm really just catching up with the scale of what the possibilities are with the business. So
There's a lot that Rick was saying there. It kind of gave me like little flashes. I think I'll start from the beginning. All three of us guys, we were all big into Legos. We all loved building stuff, like whatever. We were all very hands-on kind of guys. Both Will and me went the university route, and you were under the same pressures that we were. And I'm sure you remember as much as I do.
oh yes,
It was always go to university, go to university if you want to live a good life. Like, look at this graph. If you want to make a good living, you're going to university. What about you made you say, no, I'm not doing that, and I'm going this route instead?
yeah.
And what would you say then to a kid today who's in the same dilemma?
Yeah.
Because one thing about Ricky that's really important to note too, and it comes off very clearly when he speaks, is that he's quite intelligent. And typically the people that have, X IQ are under even more pressure to go to university, especially when we're younger. I don't really know now. We're not in high school anymore. But at least when we were going through, it was like, hey, you get good grades. You're a smart
Yeah.
kid. You should go to university. So Rick had all of those pressures, even more so than most people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, and Will would probably not know this. Jason, if you remember it, I'd be surprised. But I was actually, let's say, during the first semester of 12th grade, I was actually accepted in a university level program in the administration field. And basically, I was committed to that up until the end of the first semester. And I couldn't tell you exactly what triggered my mind to go a different route when it came to that. But I just knew. I'm trying to think if I was taking any trade courses at the first. I think first semester was menuiserie.
First semester we both did woodworking. Second semester we both did carpentry.
Yeah.
But you excelled a lot in that carpentry course, and you were always the guy that the teacher would call on.
Yeah.
Because you had a free period, I think, and I think your free period was right after carpentry.
Yeah.
So you would often stay and just fix the mistakes of the guys.
Yeah.
Because we were building baby barns at the time, and I remember that's one thing Rick did a lot. Was he had time to kill. He was caught up with his homework anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he enjoyed working with his hands. He enjoyed working on the tools. Mm-hmm. So he just hung around at the woodworking shop and just fixed guys' mistakes. Like I remember you said, like, fuck, they put the window in crooked and I got to take the Sawzall to it, rip that out, and I got to redress the whole thing, bring it level again, and got to put the window back in. Yeah. But this was a 17-year-old kid who was already learning how to do that at the time. I think that probably played a big role.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed, like, that was and it's funny because when you say it like that, I don't reminisce those days all that much. My memory's not that fantastic, but like when I think about it too, and I guess at the time I was already kind of demonstrating some leadership kind of skills, and for people that don't know me as a teenager, I was not an outgoing teenager. I was very, very introverted. Socially, I could do it less people more than more people. But when it came to those shop courses, I was very keen on, I grasped the concepts a lot, very quick. And, for me, I don't know, it was easy. It was easy, and even when it came, even when my teacher, because, one teacher with a class of 14 kids, when most of the kids are just up to no good anyway, he basically kind of designated me as a shop foreman just to help him out with, he'd basically give me, 3 or 4 of the, decent kids that were, at least would work and not try to cut their arms off with power tools, and then just they would just tag along with me and we'd just go at it. So but as a student, I would say I academically I was I was high average, let's say. I usually averaged around mid 80s, let's say, throughout most courses, but I wasn't studious. I didn't like studying. I didn't like homework. I didn't necessarily apply myself all that much. But like I say, most of my teachers kind of assumed I was going to take the university route because, I was a good, there was potential. And like I say,
Rick, you could have made $40K a year as an administrator. What the hell did you do?
I could have.
Yeah, and you could have spent 4 years learning to administrate.
Yeah, come on, you need an MBA on top of that. What are you talking about?
That's true.
Yeah.
So Ricky, what would you say to a kid today who's in grade 9, 10, 11, maybe even 12, and it's kind of like, the thing is to go to university. Why not that or whatever, and why maybe a trade might be the better idea for them, the better path?
So I think there's this giant misconception out there, and I remember, again, being hammered with it when we were in high school, where, they say if you go to university, you're guaranteed to a certain extent a certain standard of living. So you're going to have a certain wage guaranteed,
Yeah, it's kind of
upward
implied.
mobility of
Yeah.
of career choices, and that's kind of what they rattle in your head, and university make millions and billions off of that mindset and that big push.
I mean, I fell for it.
So yeah,
Actually, boys, before we started recording, we were talking about pyramid schemes.
Hmm.
There's some pretty good arguments to say that a lot of academia can be considered a
Yeah.
pyramid scheme.
Pyramid
Mhm.
scheme combined with the shell game.
Yeah, because even I'm thinking even like when we were when I was considering changing into something more trade related, because basically when I ditched the idea of going into admin, I wanted to go into trade, and at that point it was like second semester. The official deadlines for applying for courses had closed, so basically whatever was left in college was whatever trades courses were not full. So I remember like my our guidance counselor, um, she was saying basically she was trying to push me into a more technical course. I believe it was building engine.
Like a technology of some
Yeah,
sort.
it was building technology or building and
So
engineering
still
technology.
as university as college would offer.
Yeah, exactly, right? So it was one of those courses like if you wanted the option, you could transfer to a school and finish your bachelor's degree in engineering, right?
Which
So-
is still a good
Yeah,
course.
it's still I've known people that have taken those courses and are like surveyors and stuff like that and still make a very good living, right?
Well, my dad did.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah,
So
that's true.
that's exactly the course that your dad took. So
Yeah.
and so basically they were kind of pushing me that way. And for me, again, I was looking at it and I was like, yeah, but like I'm young. I was in better shape then than I am now, obviously. But I was like, it's like, like I want to do something physical. Like I want to move. And I remember kind of going through a few options, and it really came down. I think what it boiled down to, it was like I only picked a course in August before starting in September. And I fell on the millwright course, and then I think I went through pipe fitting, which is ironic considering from plumbing I went back into pipe fitting, but I went through pipe fitting and a couple other ones. But I just love working with my hands, like even auto mechanic, body shop technician. I looked at all those options when I was in high school.
Can I pause you right here?
Yeah.
I still remember the day, and I think it was 11th grade. And just say Rick's work ethic, he got a job as like tire changer, oil changer, that sort of thing at the local Canadian Tire. I still remember the day that he came home, fucking head a little bit low. I was like, "What's up, man? What's going on?" He was like, "Well, I almost lost my job at Canadian Tire today. I put the lift right through someone's floor."
I lost my job.
Oof.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, shit! I thought it was a close call on that one.
I think it's to this day, it's the only job I've ever been fired from.
Oh, I thought
Oh.
got a slap on the wrist for that one.
No, I got fired.
Yeah, they caught it.
That's
Cost them a little bit of money.
Yeah.
It was a distasteful joke then.
It's all right. It's a long time ago. So many years ago.
So they had to cover it. So that's why they fired you, I guess.
Yeah, it's they came out and they said, at the time, I mean, it was, and that was a tough job, like where we came from, like jobs where you get to work as a teenager with no experience, where you get to work with your hands that are not like Tim Hortons, working at Zeller's at the time or McDonald's, like you never got those jobs. So
Yeah, I was in your boat too
Yeah.
at the lumberyard. So I got to drive like trucks and forklifts all the time. Even actually before I had my license, like for a regular car. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's what, that's where I drove my first stick shift car, is actually working there at Canadian Tire. You're just bringing the cars in the garage bays, right? So, but it was a good whatever. I think I worked there for 4 months. Anyway, that was a long time ago.
But so one aspect you're clearly touching on here is, and especially maybe for the young active guys, or even the guys who you consider have a bit, maybe even like hard time focusing or keeping attention, like working with your hands and being active and doing something physical each day could be a good draw to many trades.
Yeah. One of the, what's really tough with the trades, like I think one of the reasons that trades are such a hard sell these days is like people don't really do anything around the house anymore.
Yeah.
As I remember, like we grew up, we were a family of three. I had an older sister and a younger brother, and my younger brother was quite hooked on video games when we were younger. And ironically, I guess he works a lot with his hands now. He's a cable technician, so and he's fairly good at what he does too. So I don't know if it runs in the genes or a certain work ethic or whatever, but he definitely didn't reflect those traits when he was a teenager. And one of the big things I remember when I was a kid is, I never knew my paternal grandfather. He passed away from cancer in the 80s before I was born. And my father was basically, my grandmother had three sons. My father was the middle son. The younger son was kind of part of a different church community. So he was very involved more with the community than he was necessarily with directly with the family. But my father kind of stepped up and then my older uncle lived 3 hours away, so it wasn't really an option for him to help my grandmother around the house. But my father would basically mow the lawn. He'd do repairs on the house with my uncles, and anytime he'd go out, or even around our house, like anytime he'd go out and do something, he'd be like Ricky, you're coming to do this. And it wasn't even like a suggestion, right? Like it was like,
Right.
you are coming to, do whatever, change a light fixture, or, repair something or reframe something, whatever. So that's, and really, if I go even before that, let's say, what really, because I wanted to be a contractor from as long as I can remember, but I think where it stemmed from is like my parents went through substantial renovations with our home throughout the years from the year 2000 on. And I just remember just kind of standing and watching the contractors doing whatever in the house, and I was like, man, like this is cool, right? And I quite enjoyed that. So
A lot of different seeds were planted.
yeah, and they were all driving nice big trucks, and I was like, oh, I want a nice big truck. And like it's silly, right? When you're a kid, that's kind of where you're.
It's why you have so many little kids attracted to a garbage truck and how it works, or a backhoe and how it works, or firefighters, or whatever it is, right? The vehicles, the magic of machinery and horsepower and all that stuff, right? So I get it, and it's I don't know, it's always nice to see kids be interested in that kind of stuff, even if it's just with their Tonka truck, right? Or Lego or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I've always said if ever I become a father, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Is what Ricky's dad did. It's not a hey, what are you doing? It's like, come on, we're going to go do this together.
Mm-hmm.
And without telling the son or the daughter that you're teaching them something, you're teaching them something.
Yeah, exactly. And it's what is it? It's like to tell me and I'll forget, show me and I'll remember, and then what is it? What's the last one is basically
make me do it, and I'll be able to show someone else,
and I'll understand, or whatever it is.
So to get back a little bit to entrepreneurship. So Rick, you graduate as a plumber. You work for a handful of years. You become you get your license.
Mm-hmm.
Then I remember you go and you work out west. You gain a little bit of experience there. You do a bit of millwrighting. You do bigger jobs, a little bit less residential. You come back, you do a little bit of prefab work, you do a little bit more service, a little bit more residential.
Mm-hmm.
At what point do you say, I've mastered my trade enough that I can step forward on my own and be independent? Because that I know, like in my case, if I want to start something, I want to feel like I've mastered like 95% of what's going to come my way before I step forward.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned that you have a higher risk tolerance. So for you, is it that you need to know all of it, or is it that you need to know just enough and you'll figure out the rest? How did you figure that out?
It kind of takes it. I mean, I want to say it takes a big set of balls there, but I don't want to, rub my shoulder too much. But
Well, it's entrepreneurship. At the end of
yeah,
the day, everyone knows it
yeah,
takes a set of
you got to
stones.
take a risk, right? And
Oh yeah, exactly.
you have to be very, very self aware of where you're lacking in terms of experience or any trait. You have to be very self aware. And how do I say this? Yeah, like I say, it takes a lot of self awareness. You got to realize that like anybody that tells you they know everything about everything, like it, they're full of crap, right? Like they're not being they're disingenuous. They're not,
Well,
you know,
it's like anybody who tells you they're strong usually aren't the strongest people.
yeah,
Right.
You know,
exactly.
So I think of plumbing, and you got. I remember when Rick had his first job with a company here in Moncton, and he was digging undergrounds, and he mastered the set of the underground, and that's when you dig out kind of like where the foundation is going to be. You lay that initial plumbing, with the foundation. So then when you frame the house for the new structure, you got all your hookups for your drains and that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually you moved on to rough-ins, where it's like it's the in-between stage when you're in the studs, and now you can put your runs of pipe for your fresh water, your sewer, but you're not quite at your finish when you put in your fixtures. And I clearly remember you going through the process, through the steps, and you basically spent an entire summer with a pickaxe and a shovel, and you just dug undergrounds and you laid pipe, and you very clearly understood what was happening there. And
it's
then
all
later
about laying
you moved
pipe.
on to the next thing. So for you, like, did you ever feel like there was mastery and that you didn't have to come back to something, or was there like always that sense of I need to learn this before I move on?
Well, like I say, like when I did my plumbing course, for me, plumbing was very easy. As academically, there were easy concepts to grasp. Right, the code is about for relevant sections, the code is about, let's say, 80 pages or so. For a while, I actually knew the code end to end, basically, like on top of my head. If you ask me now, we had some revisions since then, but like I say, it's always been sort of easy when it came to plumbing. I never and I mean, for undergrounds and rough-ins, actually the reason I left my first job was because I didn't. I did undergrounds and rough-ins for about 250 or so homes in duplex or semi-detached homes, apartments, over about 2.5 years. And at that point, I mean, like, it was pretty much second nature to, you knew kind of where everything was. You had a basic idea. Like for me, I always enjoyed knowing more than what I needed, especially when it came to construction. So, like, as a lot of guys, I think that's what puts a kind of a stick in their wheels, is they don't necessarily appreciate different aspects of different trades. So for me, it was easy when it came to, I go in a house and it's like, okay, well, like, we got to run the pipes here, but also there is HVAC that's going in. They're going to have ducts here. Electricians are going to put pot lights here. Like, we got to stay, within this area. So for me, like, I had that 3D visualization it came easy to me. But that's because I had interest in all aspects of trades. So
and you could say some sort of empathy for the other trades,
yeah,
which I'm sure a lot of them don't, or they lack.
Yeah.
And then you got the next guy contracted to come in, and he's like, "Ah, oh, Jesus."
Yeah. No, exactly. And I have a little bit of
conscientiousness, I would say.
I'm conscientious and I'm a little bit OCD when it comes to work sites. And I remember, like, when I was, I was basically leading crews from the time I was a second block, which was fairly early on, about a year into my working career. And I just always, like, anytime I do something and it's like, like, there must be a way I can do this that's a little bit quicker. Like, what? Like, we're always installing the same bathtubs. And it's like, why don't I come up with a standard of lengths of, copper pipe I need between my faucet and spout and shower head? And that way, like, we can just drill the holes always at the same place all the time. The runs of pipe are always the same lengths. Like, there must be some kind of way. And And of course, I came up with a system, and like I showed the guys around, and then the boss was like, Ricky, show the guys, like, how do you do it? What are the measurements? And then you just got to remember 2 measurements, and that's it. So, and I always like strive for a better process, more efficiency. And again, it helped me in my career in the sense that usually, like, the higher ups always appreciate when guys try to make things more efficient. So,
Go a little bit above and beyond and show that
exactly.
they care a bit more than just collecting their paycheck.
Exactly.
I wanted to ask about what's the most challenging thing right now as an entrepreneur. So, is it, you said it wasn't necessarily finding clients, because you said that seemed pretty good. Is it dealing with, I don't know, it could be suppliers, it could be your own employees.
Yeah.
What is it?
The biggest challenge in this day and age, and I talk to a lot of different contractors, I talk to suppliers, and pretty much everybody I talk to, it all comes down to the workforce. Like in this day and age, and again, entrepreneurship can be a little bit of an issue for that, because everybody has it in their mind that they can be their own boss, but not everybody really has or realizes anyway what it takes. And again, like there's a lot of soul searching that has to go into making that decision, and you have to accept a certain set of risks. And what I find is you get a lot of people now, and you can say it's whatever, like millennials or whatever, just a general workforce at large, are more or less entitled. They're expecting higher wages for less work. They don't get along with people that well, like and they're hard to manage, and that's the biggest thing. Like, for me, I thought when I started, and financially it is quite a big burden. Like, if I would have stuck it
Yeah.
on my own, would have been, like just working by myself out of my truck and trailer, I'd be keeping busy. I'd probably be making decent money. But the vision I have for the business was to grow past that and actually become a business. I think there's a big misconception between people that say I own my business and people who are self-employed. You can be
Right.
self-employed and not have a business, because essentially, if you're doing something on your own, you can work at that thing for 30 years. And yet, if you say you're going to sell your business, all you're worth is, and let's say in trades term, you're worth whatever your van and tools are worth. Because unless you have like a really locked down contract with a huge contract with someone that is actually worth money, it's like your business is not worth anything. Your business is your name, because people are expecting to deal with you. Right. So that's where you have to draw a line between self-employment and an actual business.
That reminds me a lot of the quadrants of Robert Kiyosaki, where you have the employee, the self-employed, which both kind of work for a paycheck, even though the self-employed is a little bit closer to proper entrepreneurship. And then a business is essentially a collection of systems. And eventually you become an investor where you're as detached as can be, and you're playing more on the financial side of it. So, Rick, if I understand correctly, what you're saying is your goal was never to be self-employed, because you still felt like an employee, but just without a boss. And you wanted to have a business, a collection of systems that was producing value with your guidance.
Well, when I started, again in 2019, my expectations were very different from what they are now. But again, I started on my own. I just figured I could do better than whatever I was doing, right? So for me, it was more, I wanted to be able to work my 40 hours. I wanted to do a little bit better. If I could make a little bit more money, that was okay. But then when I hit, actually, I would say when COVID hit, really, in early 2020, for some reason, construction just went wild, and I started receiving calls.
Oh yeah.
By that point, my name was, a little bit out there. People were calling me, and 90% of my business that I have currently, it's not from Google. It's not from any kind of app or nothing. It's word of mouth.
Right.
People have dealt with me. They like dealing with me. They know what to expect. So yeah, referrals and return customers.
Let me ask you, you said, so business got started booming for you with COVID, and that's true. Like so many people were just like, well, fuck it. I'm going to renovate. I'm going to build a deck. I'm going to get all this work done. So totally get that part. But do you think it also might be a double-edged sword as to now it's maybe harder to maintain, retain, or manage employees because of this whole COVID policy, whether that's, a lot of free
Yeah,
money
well,
or I can just stay at home.
yeah, that because here in Canada anyway, we had the CERB program, right? That morphed
Right.
into another program that is basically CERB but to a different name. So I guess,
Right.
But
It's employment
it's
insurance, I think, or something like that. Will,
no,
are you
it's
aware
not
of that program? I've heard of it too, but I know it's hurting
I've heard it.
recruiting at the
Yeah.
hospital.
Yeah, I know it too. I forget the name of it, another acronym or whatever. But
because
it's the same case for everything.
Yeah,
Like the service industry, they're having a hard time finding like waiters and waitresses, for instance. Like
basically what those programs have done, as far as and we've seen it real time. And I mean, it's not something that was necessarily hard to predict, but it's basically taken out the whole sector of the population working under $20 an hour, let's say. So when it comes to construction, when you're trying to find laborers and apprentices, it basically makes that impossible, because if you're trying to hire an apprentice, and again, if I can hire someone and pay them, let's say I could pay them $13 an hour, which most people working in construction nowadays are making well above that, regardless of what their roles are. Like if I find someone at $13 an hour, I can afford to take that person under my wing, and especially in a trade like plumbing, where you're charging, higher than, let's say, plumbing, usually plumbing, electrical, HVAC, you're charging higher rates that are anywhere between, let's say, $60 and $120 an hour. So at $13 an hour, I can afford to take someone under my wing and, have them tag along on jobs where I don't necessarily need, a second set of hands, but I can afford to have them around still and train them, and that training is invaluable. Like, you can't put a
right.
price on that. But if you have to, let's say they say that, like, and I see memes about that all the time on Facebook and social media. They say, well, if you paid people more, maybe they'd stay. Maybe they, what? It doesn't make a damn difference whether you pay them more, you pay them less. If someone is not happy, they're not happy. I've had employees that have worked for me. And I mean, I've only been really employing people for not even a year and a half now. And I've had people working for me for very good wages, above average for the area. And you know what? Like, I still can't retain them. They're not happy with something. It's, this, it's that. And it's like, you can't even, suck it up for a little bit. And it's tough too, as a, for anybody out there who's looking at starting a company, where you're grinding through those first years. It could be 5 years or even up to 10 years, depending. It all depends on what your final vision is, or what scale you want to bring your business to. But you're basically going to be struggling all the way up to that benchmark. So it's hard to get people to necessarily see your vision of what could be. And when you're a young business and you're starting in an area that's highly competitive, you have to take into account that you're probably going to cycle a lot of people. It's going to be hard to attract good people from the get-go, because you don't have the credibility as a business. Like, it's hard to tell someone and say, hey, come work for me. I got 40 hours in a week for you, when they've been working for the same employer for 6, 7, 8 years steady. And, you might offer them more money, but they're like, at least I know what I'm getting where I'm at right now. Right. So, and I find, and again, like, there is, and again, I'm very, I'm not very, I guess, risk averse again. So for me, it would make sense that, I would take a chance on something like that. But for a lot of people, and again, when you that's kind of one thing too, when you have to take into consideration when you start a business. Like, we don't have the, like, I'm engaged to be married, as you guys know, but we don't have any kids. So, if you have a family, like you have kids, like even us, like, me and my fiance, we both work long hours. It strains the relationship at some points. And it's tough, like it's all stuff you have to take in consideration when you're going to take that leap. You're taking a huge risk on not only financially, you're taking a risk when it comes to relationships. And like I say, it's all stuff you have to consider when you're getting into business.
So one thing that we kind of touched on throughout the whole episode is what kind of person is well suited for entrepreneurship. And I truly think some people are not. And I know Ricky and both William, you're familiar with the big 5 personality traits. So I'm thinking, what about we go through just the big 5, like an overview of each, and Rick, you tell us what you think an entrepreneur needs in those personality traits. So
Sure.
so the acronym is OCEAN for the big 5 personality traits, and this is it's one of the hardest things in psychology. Hardest as in the sense of like well researched, well developed, well proven. So you have openness. That's essentially your it's a characteristic that includes imagination and insight. It's your eagerness to learn new things, to see new things, to interact with new people, and it's the sense of adventure. Conscientiousness, the C, is a trait that includes high levels of thoughtfulness, good impulse control, and being very goal directed. This is typically the people who are organized, structured, and who
Work hard.
yeah, or very self aware. People who are high in conscientiousness. Extroversion is the ability to feel positive emotions, so feel happiness, feel joy, all that. But it is also your ability to interact and want to interact with others. Agreeableness is the more agreeable you are, the more you go along to get along. If someone says something, you'll just kind of politely smile and nod, or you'll be easily brought onto their side. You tend to be very caring. You tend to be very people-oriented if you're agreeable. And lastly, you have neuroticism. It's kind of the opposite of extroversion in the sense that it's your propensity to feel negative emotion. So that's how easily perturbed you are, how easily you feel anxiety and depression. It's also your volatility, how easy you are to set off.
Yeah. So, by the way, anyone who wants to read more about this or even do the test, I think it's like $5. It's pretty fun. I think we've all done it before, and we actually compared. There, you can find it at many websites, but this one specifically is understandmyself.com, and I believe it was part of Jordan Peterson's research.
Yeah. It's a very well established one. I think he has 10,000 plus of a sample size before even launching it. So it's very well established, and it gives you your percentile ranking. So if you
it's got cool summaries.
Yeah, it's very well done. And not only does it have the big 5, but it has a subcategory of 2 like breakdown levels of each. But just for brevity's sake, I say for today, let's just stick to the main 5. Mm-hmm. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to read the quick little part of each characteristic. And Rick, I know you kind of remember where you are in them, but just tell me, in your opinion, where should an entrepreneur be? Should they be more of one thing or less of one thing? Mm-hmm. So,
or does it matter?
Or does it matter at all? Exactly.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't matter, tell us.
Yeah.
The first one is openness. So openness is a characteristic that includes imagination and insight. The world, other people, and eagerness to learn and experience new things is particularly high for this personality trait. It leads to having a broad range of interests and being more adventurous when it comes to decision making. So the world is your oyster. You see all the possibilities and you love it all.
Yeah.
How is that for an entrepreneur?
Ironically, if I remember correctly, that's actually one of the characteristics that I actually scored very low on was openness.
I remember.
Yeah. I
were very
don't
low on that.
know.
Yeah.
I don't think it was really that accurate because I don't consider myself a very close person, let's say. But openness is definitely, I would say, if you're in business, you have to be open. You have to be willing to accept new ideas because any business that you're invested in, it doesn't matter if it's plumbing, it doesn't matter if it's a shoe store or a restaurant. You have to be open to what the world around you has to say. Yeah, you have to be able to adapt to the world around you, like especially in a world where everything's changing, every minute. Um, if you're not receptive to the changes around, you're not going to make it. You have to be willing to. You have to be willing. You can't be stuck in your ways, and especially in if you're in trades, um, you get a lot of old timers or guys that have been around for a bit. Like we tend to be a bunch that's a little bit more closed minded. We like to be set in our ways and things to be what they are. But realistically, like things change on a, they change day by day, or I tell my guys is like, I have guys that work for me that have been plumbing for a long time, and I said, well, I know you've done this way for a certain time, but I want you to change. I want you to do it this way, and I'll tell them the reason. This is what you got to do, and then they, whether they do it or not, I'm hoping they do it. But yeah, it's definitely an aspect that business wise you have to be open. The other aspect of openness is that they talk about creativity, and like when it comes to trades, people need plumbers, people need electricians. There's not much to be creative about necessarily, but business wise, if you're in a highly competitive market like we are, you have to do things slightly differently. Like if you're going to go in business, try to offer something that is not already out there,
Yeah, for sure.
because otherwise, like, how do you attract, new customers? And it's like, if you're offering the exact same thing as Joe Blow next door, you got to be able to, put yourself above the competition in some shape, way, or form. So,
It's kind of like a Blockbuster versus Netflix, right?
yeah,
Netflix started, you can actually rent out physical copies,
yeah.
and then eventually they went into the digital space. That was insane, and turns out they're worth I don't know how many.
No,
Yeah.
man, people never watch movies over the internet. That makes no
Yeah,
sense. What are you talking about?
exactly. And then
Get out of
Blockbuster
here,
just
yeah,
tanked.
hippie.
So
You mean I
So, yeah.
can't answer the phone while I'm watching my favorite show?
yeah, exactly.
Yuck.
Get off the internet. I have to call my sister.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
So next one.
conscientiousness, which is the primary dimension of dutifulness and achievement in the Big Five personality scientific model. Conscientiousness is a measure of obligation, attention to detail, hard work, persistence, cleanliness, efficiency, and adherence to rules. Conscientious people tend to implement their plans, establish and maintain order. Well, I think everything they mentioned earlier, I would bet my bottom dollar you're pretty darn conscientious.
Yeah. I was definitely in the higher percentile in conscientiousness. In terms of business wise, it is definitely important that you are conscientious. Um, and actually, it's kind of funny because I think as a whole, most people fall in either or openness or conscientiousness. Um, and a lot of people don't have traits, and that's maybe where both traits, and that's maybe where partnerships are interesting when it comes to business, because someone in openness that is low in conscientiousness, they could come up with the greatest ideas and not be able to put it together, right? And same thing for someone who's highly conscientious but is very, very not creative and not open, and like you got zero chance in starting a business and making
They
it
can
run.
execute.
Yeah, you can execute, but you can't come up with the actual ideas, right? So,
Yeah.
but it is important, like the conscientiousness. I kind of compare it to the like if you want to get political, like the liberal conservative scale. Like you need to be somewhere in the middle to be able to function uh, in a sustainable way. So for a business, you need someone conscientious. It's going to be, if it's your accountant, if it's your bookkeeper, someone has to keep track of what is going on. Project managers, like
Yeah.
it, there has to be order and some kind of a process, especially when you start hiring people. That's when I realized like how important systems are, and you need to establish good systems that are easy to learn and execute, so that and especially if you work in trades, like we're not talking about a bunch of people that went to university and did masters and whatever, right?
Yeah, I have
Like
the same thing at the hospital.
yeah, you need easy to learn systems that anybody can just come and pick it up, right?
Yeah.
So, and
No,
you have to be aware of that, even though maybe you won't come up with it, but you have to know that you need it.
yeah. You mentioned that. That's actually something Peterson talks about, is how basically if you have more of a, typically, again, rule of thumb is like a more liberal brain will have more of that openness and creativity,
hmm
but they'll typically test lower in conscientiousness, and vice versa with more the conservative brain, right? So,
We
you
need more
could
of other
say,
people's money, but give it to me, and I don't know how.
yeah, yeah, but so it could be like, I have a really cool idea and I'm creative, but the guy who runs my company is a lot more conscientious than me. He's a really good manager or CEO or
Yeah.
whatever.
And again, like when it comes to business, like business ownership and all that, you have to be very, very self-aware of where your faults are. So you have to know, it's like, I have to know that I'm low in conscientiousness, and I need someone who can make up for that deficit on my end.
I think if you're low on
Right.
conscientiousness, you have no way of knowing that you're low on conscientiousness. But if you're high on conscientiousness, then you're like, hey, I'm actually pretty high on conscientiousness.
Yeah, catch
So, what about extroversion?
So extroversion, again, like for anybody who's known me when I was a teenager, I was very introverted.
Hang on, I'm going to cut you off here. I'm going to take
yeah.
the lead on this one. Because Rick is right. He was very introverted when we were both teenagers. But
Yeah, I barely knew you, but I remember that you were a pretty quiet kid.
But
Yeah.
he was not introverted in the sense that he was shy and scared. He was introverted in the sense that he was always very self-assured in his sphere of competency, like he was mentioning earlier, like when we were doing the baby barns, he was happy to jump in, take a leadership role, and do that. So it's not that he was shy. It's that he truly did not care about the high school BS, the little social game.
The clicks, yeah.
He had, and I think that's when we get to neuroticism, that's going to be a big part of that. But he truly, truly did not care. And it was only as kind of everyone else kind of caught up to his level of maturity. Now, and I'm not saying that, as, Rick was above everyone, but I think he saw through a lot of the bullshit. And then when other people grew up and grew into more real, tangible, sizable things, and then it was more of a level playing field. And then you could speak a little bit more eye to eye. So yeah, no, he was very reserved, but I think it came from a different place than you'd expect the reserved person to be.
Yeah, because even as a teenager, I interacted very well with adults. Like that was not necessarily an issue. I probably enjoyed that more than I did interacting with my own peers in most situations. But it does. I mean, it certainly helps business wise if you are extroverted when it comes to reeling in the business. Getting new customers, because especially starting a business. I mean, if you take over a business and you got contracts, it's one thing. But yeah, if you're starting a business from scratch, if you do not know how to interact with people, it will, depending on, again, what your scale of whatever business you're in, whatever your final destination is business wise, if you're not extroverted, and you want to grow to a certain scale, it will take time. And again, you might have to, it's not impossible if you're very extroverted, but you might have to, put your faith in somebody else, take a partner, have a very strong manager who's very extroverted. Someone has to interact with people.
I think it's doable if you're not super high in extroversion. However, know that it's a lot more exhausting for an introverted person to be extroverted. That's another thing too that people don't realize is just, it's not necessarily that someone's like completely incapable of doing it, but it's pretty exhausting for people who just, because for them it's like, it's putting on a show that normally someone else could do effortless. Wow. Without effort.
where I work as a manager, like I'm often playing a performative role. And it's something that I know that I can do well and I can do it comfortably. But at the end of the day, it always feels like a performance. It never feels like the baseline. Like the comfort zone is stretched far enough that I can switch into that at a drop of a hat. But it's always, to a certain extent, a mask. And I think that's where people who are slightly more introverted, they can develop that. And that's a very obvious point of development. And I think that's something that Rick has done well through the years. But especially where he's operating in his sphere of competence, it comes a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Sure.
You have, to a certain extent, you have to repress yourself and whatever. Like if I told everybody whatever I wanted to tell them when I want to tell them, like nobody would want to talk to me. Because every
I think
day
that's all humans.
You're either dealing with employees, you're dealing with customers, you're dealing with contractors, and it's like, what the hell are you doing? And every day you get into at least one of those situations, if not multiple. So you have to, again, like sometimes you got to be very aware of that. And even for me, like, again, like I still think I'm more on the introverted side by quite a bit. So usually when I come home from a, 12, 13, 14 hour day, I'm just exhausted, like my fiance, she has a hard time sleeping. For me, I just pass right out when I hit the bed.
Lights
I have
out.
no issues with that whatsoever. So it's just so mentally exhausting, So
and that leads very well into the next one, agreeableness.
I was just going to say,
I think this year is going to really say a lot about entrepreneurship. All right, so that leads very well into the next trait, which is agreeableness. And I think this one here is going to really be a key factor when it comes to business owners. And I would argue, just a little hypothesis here, this is the difference between for-profit and non-profit business. So I'm going to start off with the jobs here that's often listed as people who are high in agreeableness. Charity workers, medicine, mental health, soup kitchen, people who dedicate time, the arts. So people who exhibit a high degree of agreeableness will show signs of trust, altruism, kindness, and affection. Highly agreeable people tend to have high pro-social behaviors, which means that they're more inclined into helping others. Sharing, comforting, cooperating are traits that lend themselves to highly agreeable personality types. Empathy towards others is commonly understood as form of agreeableness, even though it doesn't quite fit. Okay, Rick, you're a business owner. Should you be agreeable?
So again, if you're making the distinction between for-profit, non-profit, so for-profit obviously implies that you need to make money. You don't have to be greedy. You don't have to make ridiculous margins. You can pay. Like I believe in helping. I'm not necessarily a guy who's going to volunteer a lot, but I believe if I can make the difference in at least the life of my own employees, I'm at least going to pay them well. So I pay my guys well, at least I think, according to the standards of the area. And I try to give them, like I got a health benefit plan. I try to help them out as much as I can without being too benevolent. You have to, you can be as nice as you want, but at some point you have to cut down on the agreeableness. You gotta be able to tell people no. You gotta be able to tell people what it is, how it is. You deal with employees, you deal with contractors, you deal with clients. Like when people start arguing with you, that like, oh well, this bill here is this and that, and I don't have the money and this and that. It's like, yeah, that's fine, but you know what? I don't have money either. Like I'm pouring myself into this business, and it has to. I'm not subsidized by the government or any other outfit out there. Like, you got to make money. The reason you're in business ultimately is to make your life and hopefully the life of your employees better. You can't.
I feel like you have to be mom and dad sometimes.
Yeah,
basically, you have to tell the kid no.
Yeah, no, exactly.
That's enough, or you do it this way. I asked you to do that, right? So, and last but not least, Jason, take us on with the neuroticism.
So I remember when we did this test and Rick came back chuckling. He got the second percentile, if my memory is correct, for neuroticism.
Yeah.
So second percentile means there's 98% that are more of something than you. So he basically has the blood pressure of like a dead fish. So neuroticism. Neuroticism is characterized by sadness, moodiness, and emotional instability. Often mistaken for antisocial behavior, or worse, even greater psychological issue. Neuroticism is a physical and emotional response to stress and perceived threats in someone's daily life. Individuals who exhibit high levels of neuroticism will tend to experience mood swings, anxiety, and irritability. Some individuals who experience sudden changes in character from day-to-day perspectives could be highly neurotic and respond to high stress levels in their work and personal life. So, Rick, everything I just read is not you. How is that an advantage or a disadvantage in business?
If as an advantage, if you're growing a business, you're going to have a lot of stress. Again, you're going to be dealing with a workforce that's reluctant to work. You're going to be dealing with customers who don't want to pay. You're going to be dealing with suppliers knocking on your door to collect money every month. You have to understand that this is par for course of what you're getting into. If you want to build a business, you're going to have to take those risks, and you have to shoulder them to a certain extent. I would say probably in my case, where I'm very low in neuroticism, not necessarily a good thing in terms of you don't necessarily have that pressure of failure on you. Like if you're moderate in neuroticism, you're like, okay, like I'm willing to accept a certain amount of stress, but like there's a certain point where it's like, okay, like I need to correct course or else I'm going to fail.
Yeah, they always say like a certain amount of stress is a good amount of stress because it'll keep you on your toes. It'll keep you on edge enough to be sharp that day. To bring your A game when need be, whether that's for a test or a presentation or performing whatever it is, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because for me, like I say, like being low in neuroticism, like sometimes I wake up in the morning and it's like, you know what, like the world is burning around me, but like I'm 31 years old. Like I could probably run this company into ground and start like 3 more like during my lifetime, right?
I can burn 3 more to the
ground. I wish I had that level of or lack thereof.
Both Will and me are very much more neurotic than Will. But we're listening to this. They're like, "Fuck you! It's not an advantage."
So Ricky, last thing I'll say is I feel like you could be a champ, like a world record holder or a champion of like I don't know, like holding your breath underwater in ice, like in the Arctic, because you're just like so calm. Your heart, you could just slow your heart rate down right to like nothing.
Yeah. Well, see, that's the problem, right? Let's say you take that metaphor and you're in the Arctic and you can basically stay there forever because you're not neurotic, but that you're going to drown before you realize it's time to come up for air, right? So again,
you say that's strong-willed.
Yeah. So
that's like commitment. That's like dog. That's like dog level motivation there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You're really going for it.
Imagine you do everything to the intensity and commitment of a dog. Like to your point, Will. Imagine like you're an entrepreneur and you're as dedicated as a dog. Like, okay, we're going to the park. fuck yeah, I'm opening this business. Yeah, we're
There'd be-
going.
There'd be a lot of guys dropping dead.
I think it's one of the Family Guy episodes where Brian gets like some kind. I think he works at like a Hummer dealership. And, he's got like this poster on his wall that's like some kind of a tennis ball or whatever, and he's just like, "I'm gonna get that ball," like just like.
Right. I mean, beagles can run till they die if they get a scent and aren't well trained. Labs can kill themselves easily by overeating. So it's no joke.
So
Ricky,
one's a fat pig and the other one's just like dedicated to the cause. That's two very different creatures.
oh yes, very. Although like then labs will like swim forever.
Yeah.
All right. So Ricky, where can people find you if they want? It's in the Moncton area, of course. So for Ottawa listeners or anybody around the world, Ricky is located in Moncton, New Brunswick.
International rates if you have to go to Ireland or something.
Yeah. If you're trying to call me from Ottawa, like it's gonna be a very, very steep fee. So
it's worth it though.
Yeah. Well, like it's. At the end of the day, if your basement's flooding, you probably don't want to wait 14 hours for me to get there. So
to turn the water off.
So where can Monctonians find you?
So for people in Moncton and the area, the region, really, they can find me at YMIPlumbing.ca. So fairly simple. So that's the letters YMI Plumbing. I'm not a huge social media guy, so but you can Google me. I'm there.
Do you prefer a call?
Yeah, you can call at 506-875-0106, and if I can help somebody out, I try to do my best. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Well, Ricky, thanks a lot for your time today.
No worries, bud.
Pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Cheers.